Hey, howdy everybody. Welcome to our Old School RuneScape Road to 1 Billion series. I'm your host, Millennium RPGs, and today we're on episode 12. I'm trying to keep these intros shorter, so I'm going to keep this one brief. However, on the first day of recording, the recording was a bit botched, so I ended up catching screenshots of each of the level ups. So here's a slideshow for you. After taking care of our mage, I decided to hop into melee. I started training with attack, that way we could get up to the whip. I got a little tunnel vision on this and kind of pushed it till we got there. Maybe I could have waited a little bit longer before going for the whip, but ultimately we're going to have to do it eventually, so I just settled for doing it then. But with access to the whip, we'll be able to get into bossing a little bit sooner. We'll also be able to breeze through early quests, and it'll help with Slayer a little bit, so it's definitely something that I wanted to get done. Also, we took care of a couple of mining levels. Thanks for sticking with me through the slideshow, and let's get back to our regularly scheduled program. So after the massive grind to get our attack up to 70, I decided to go ahead and purchase the whip. So we pull up our cash stack, and that's what we're going to be dumping it into. This is so that we can level our strength and defense equally, and get everything ready so we can get into quests and just breeze through the early quests, as well as with the whip we can get into some later quests without too terribly much difficulty. This will also help us with Slayer in the future. We did end up getting the whip without too terribly much of a hassle. In fact, it's slightly cheaper than what I recall them being. The next thing I wanted to try to do was get a hold of a trident, since in my mind I was able to use it. I thought that I could get my magic up to 70 and it would be available to me. Instead, it's 75, so we still got some more magic training to do in the future. But I do eventually realize this. Of course, this wasn't until after I had purchased the strongest staff that I could get a hold of. It kind of ties up the 5 mil for a little bit, but we really didn't lose too very much money on selling it back, maybe 20k or so. But until then, the money was tied up. After posting the staff back up to sell, I tried to get a hold of the Aram set next, not realizing that I don't even have the defense levels required to equip the robes, so that would have been another massive sink of cash that I couldn't afford to tie up at the time. So fortunately, it didn't come through, and we settled for going for the light robes, the light mystic robes, and a smoke staff. And of course, we tried to sell the gloves back because we're using the combat bracelets, and the blood runes did eventually come through. Next, I picked up some runes for teleportation. Along with some jewelry, this will pretty much have a set for doing Slayer. I wanted to get into Slayer so I could do animal magnetism, so I'd be able to get a hold of Avis devices for future range training so we can get back into Slayer. Now with everything bought, we're ready to get into Slayer and get our next 9 levels. Of course, as soon as I left the Grand Exchange, the staff sold, so that wasn't tied up anymore. The next thing I had to do to prep for Slayer was purchase some of these miscellaneous items, so we had to run back and grab some gold. But we ended up picking up everything that we should need and pick up our first assignment, which was Scorpions. So since we had the Ring of Dueling, it was super easy to get to, and we teleported right over to them. To start farming points for Slayer, in the very beginning, I'm going to be going with the lowest Slayer Master that I can, and then every 5th task, I'll go back to the highest Slayer Master to get a bonus on Slayer points, just so that we can get our unlocks early on, and after that, we'll go ahead and just stick with the highest Slayer Master I can. I wanted to test whether or not it would be worth using blood runes for these early tasks. If it was fast enough, it would be worth it, but ultimately, it still wasn't worth it. It cost me about 1k per creature, and I don't really want to waste that kind of money. I wouldn't recommend using blood runes for these early tasks. Our second task ended up being Ice Fiends. They're super easy, low defense. I went with melee, though since they use magic damage, you're better off going range. It is what it is, though. I didn't get any levels for the Slayer task, but at this point, I had learned of the collapse options for the chat box. It's not going to be super beneficial to you guys watching the video, but if you play the game, it's super helpful for keeping the clutter down. If you're interested, I'd suggest looking into it. It's pretty awesome. For a third task, we ended up with cow fights. These are really good for experience. Unfortunately, since my defense levels are so low, I didn't necessarily feel comfortable getting into the soldiers, so I settled for the low-level workers. Still really good experience for my level, at least for my Slayer level, but ultimately it could be put to better use if you're doing this on a higher defense account. I had forgotten to harvest my cactus vines earlier, so this route was kind of convenient. If any of you have been running to the cow fight lair in order to do your cow fight tasks, there's actually a Slayer cave right over here that you can do your Slayer tasks in. It's not usually as cluttered, and it's a shorter run, so take advantage of it. After getting our Slayer level up to 18, it was time to hop into the Animal Magnetism quest. With Animal Magnetism complete, we got our first device for free. I also went ahead and purchased some steel arrows to upgrade it in the future. Once we get our range level up to 50, we'll return here and pick up the new device. Also, we got a pretty good batch of experience from this quest. I was able to use a rune axe from this point forward. Since I hadn't picked up the Amulet of Fury yet, I went ahead and posted it for 20k below its actively traded price to help recoup some of the loss that I made on the Trident. After making sure we had our gear together, we were ready to move into range training. As you can see from the chat box, we did get our range level up to level 50. Unfortunately, I dropped the ball. I was recording my alternate accounts window instead of this account's window. It wasn't the recording software's fault this time. I had checked the wrong box, and that's completely on me, and I do apologize for not having those levels recorded. Well, after that, we did go ahead and get our device upgrade. We also decided that if we're going to be leveling our ranged and we want to equip better ranged gear, and since we can't equip the Aram's robes yet, we may as well get our defense level up next, so I kind of put more priority into getting my defense level up, which our Fury came in just in time for. Now that we have the whip, it would have been more efficient for me to train over where the 4 crabs are, over to my left. Unfortunately, every world was full and I went through every world twice. There were no open positions, so I wasn't the most efficient with these levels, but what can you do? As you can probably tell from the experience drops, we were using the shared combat style. This way we'd be able to level attack, strength, and defense all together. It's slightly slower. Well, it's about a third the speed, but it's efficient in the fact that the whip's really good at it, so I figured may as well do what it's good for. This process of training up our melee for the week ended up costing us roughly 30 hours at Sand Crabs. It took a while. Fortunately, it didn't take any longer than that, but this was a grind that was going to have to get out of the way either way, so here we are. Here's the melee gear that we upgraded to. We have the Warrior's Ring for the slash bonus the whip uses. We have the Dragon Boots for the strength bonus that gives. We have the Combat Bracelets for its mini bonuses that it gives. We have the Dragon Plate Legs because that was the next logical upgrade over Granite Legs. We have the Granite Shield, which will upgrade to a Defender later on. We have the Granite Body, which will upgrade to a Torso later on. We have the Fury, which is our best in slot for the moment. I guess the Blood Fury would be better, but we definitely don't have access to that yet. We have the Obsidian Cape, which, because we had money to spend, and because until we get the Legends Cape or Skill Cape, it's our best in slot. And we have the Warrior's Helm, which we'll be upgrading once we get the Firminic Isles complete. And here's the hit that our cash stack took. It was looking pretty slim by this point. And with the completion of Firminic Isles, we have access to the Helm of Natives Knot. The next logical upgrade to get would be the Defenders, so that's what we hop into next. Bonus clip for you guys. Look at this miracle cactus. I have never come across a cactus that gave so many spines, especially at such a low farming level, whatever my farming level was at the time, like 56. 23 cactus spines from one cactus was just incredible. Anyways, back to the vid. Now that we had our melee levels high enough, we were able to gain access to the Warriors Guild, where we'll be getting our defenders. With cheap food right down the hall from here, it was super easy to get the tokens. Originally I decided not to do prayer flicking because food was cheap and easy to come by, but later on I decided may as well get the prayer flicking training in, and so I did for many hours. We got our first defender after 32 Cyclops. It took another 48 Cyclops to get our second defender. And our next defender took half as long at 28 Cyclops. 12 Cyclops into the next defender, we got a Troll Longbone drop. The next defender took 66 Cyclops, so they were being kind of stingy at this point. We ended up getting 61 defense and strength, as well as a total level 1000 here. 72 Cyclops later, we finally got the Mithril Defender. And we obtained the Addy Defender after only 35 more Cyclops. It ended up taking us 68 Cyclopses to get the Rune Defender. We were finally ready to move on to the Dragon Defender. And of course, with it being twice as rare, go figure it would take me a while to find it. 200 more Cyclops in, we got the shield left half. The RNG gods were laughing. After 209 Cyclops, twice the drop rate, we finally got our first Dragon Defender. Here's the loot that I felt like picking up during the entire period of us collecting Defenders. So, not a great moneymaker. Finally, with all the Defenders, it took us about 6 hours inside the rooms with the Cyclops, and another hour and a half, roughly, of collecting tokens. So, we spent roughly 7.5 hours trying to just get the Dragon Defender. Unfortunately, while I had planned on getting the torso, this ate a lot into my time that I had available, so the torso is going to have to wait. And for those of you who are curious, it took me 349 Cyclops to get our Rune Defender, and 558 Cyclops in total to finish off the Dragon Defender with all the others. Which, if you're curious about the math behind that, that's right on drop rate for the standard Defenders with the drop rate of 1 out of 50. We got 1 out of 49.85. But unfortunately for the Dragon Defender, like I've already said, we were 2 times the drop rate that we should have had. While we got the equipment tab open on screen, I'll go ahead and cover that I would like to get the torso next week. But the Barrow's gloves, while I'll be putting some time into quests next week, a lot of time into quests next week, I cannot promise that I'll be able to get all the way to Barrow's gloves, though I'll get as close as I can. Also, if we can get the money together, I'd like to get a Berserker Eye from the Nightmare Zone, but that's going to have to wait until we get the rest of the equipment sorted out. Alright, let's go ahead and head over to the Grin Exchange to catch up on our stats, and then we'll sign out for the episode. Our total bank value is resting at a cozy 11.4 mil by the end of the episode. Well, in addition to what's left inside the Grin Exchange, it's probably closer to 12 mil. But we're going to have to focus on getting some more money together because we're going to have to buy a bond by next episode. But we'll deal with that when the time comes. Now moving on to our total levels. I honestly didn't expect to hit 1,000 total level. While I was leveling my defense and strength at the sand crabs, I was pretty certain I wasn't going to make it to 1,000 total level. But after doing some quests, it pushed us over it. Getting some levels while we were at the Cyclops helped push us even further. So overall, total levels looking really healthy by the end of the episode. Moving into our total quest points for the week, we did meet the average 2 quests per episode with the Animal Magnetism and the Fremnik Isles quests. Next week we'll be blowing the average out of the water whenever we get into focusing on quests, but for now I'm grateful to have at least met that average. And this brings us to the end of the episode. It's been a grind. It's been a long grind. Between the combat training, yeah, it's AFK at the sand crabs, but it's still a grind. You still have to babysit it. Between that and the Defender grind, it's been a long week. It's been a long week. Don't get me wrong, I've been having fun. I'm still having fun, still enjoying the process. There's still multiple other grinds I need to get out of the way. As I've said throughout the episode, the Fighter Torso, the Barrow's Gloves, the Slayer levels, just grinding out money to get to that 1 bill. Like, I'm still looking forward to all the grind. I'm just pointing out that it is a grind. I'm looking forward to getting into flipping. It's not going to be a primary focus of this series, as I've stated before throughout the series, but it is something I want to get going in the background. Flipping is great. You get so much satisfaction out of going and doing something, coming back and seeing a profit. Possible loss, but possible profit. Give it your best guess. That's kind of the whole thrill of it. Ultimately, the point is, I'm having fun with the series. I still have a lot of plans for the series. There's still a lot of things I need to do. There's still a lot of things I want to try. There's just a lot still to do. Oh, and bossing. Oh, yeah, anyways. Oh, let's sign out for the episode. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a like, comment, share, subscribe, all the good stuff that promotes the channel. That'd be the quickest way of getting feedback for whether or not I need to change something for the series. Now there's currently a double experience happening in RS3, so I'm going to hop on that. Y'all be safe out there, and toodles.